Hello everyone, I'm Soma Mazumdar.
And I'm Orod and welcome to Kanban Lab podcast. In each episode, we'll pick a common question and dive into a different aspect of Kanban, exploring its principles, practices, and applications, and answering that question.
Our goal in this podcast is to demystify Kanban and help listeners understand how it can benefit their teams and organizations through addressing the common misconceptions, clarifying concepts, and answering questions about Kanban. Morning, Orod.
Good morning, Soma. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm very good. I'm getting ready to go to Europe tomorrow.
I know, a big travel coming up. Are you excited?
I am very excited, and probably next time we record the next episode, I'll be somewhere in Europe. Where
Wow.
exactly? Most probably in Berlin or maybe Manchester. I don't know, but one of
Nice.
those.
I want to see all the photos and the sceneries then.
Yeah, and then I can report weather in Europe.
Yes. So, how's the weather in Melbourne today?
It's pretty good actually. Sunny, a little bit chilly, but it's good. Yeah, it's
Mm,
nice and fresh.
good.
How's
So
weather in Sydney?
it's the same, but I think the cold is getting too much for me. So I'm already shivering.
Ah, all right. Okay, so what should we talk about?
Okay, I have heard something. I want you to tell me what do you think
Yes.
about it. So, like again, some teams were talking that they want to do Scrumban.
Oh, I love that. I love that topic.
Sure. So let's
That's
let's talk about it.
yeah, that's one of my favorite topic. I think that's probably one of the biggest myth in Kanban.
Yes.
What is a Scrumban? Because yeah, a lot of people said that we need to be a Scrumban or we need to do Scrumban,
Mm,
and I think it's a good topic to talk about. So I'll start from
mm,
basically where it comes from. The terminology of Scrumban comes from. I think around 2011,
mm,
Corey Ladas.
mm,
He helped a company because they've been using Scrum,
mm,
and they noticed that okay, Scrum doesn't help us anymore,
mm,
and we want to try another approach. But
mm,
they've been using Scrum for a while. People used to Scrum ceremonies and practices and all those kind of things.
mm.
And when they asked Corey to come and help them, so Corey said, okay, we don't want to break everything that they do.
Mm.
And he used one of the Kanban principles, start from,
Where,
what you
where you
do,
are. Mm,
where you are. And because they've been using Scrum,
mm,
he said, okay, we start from where you are, which is Scrum, and then slowly help them to transform from Scrum to Kanban.
mm,
And then later on, when he was talking about that case study,
mm.
he called this transmission period, he called it Scrumban, which is you are not fully Scrum anymore and you are not fully Kanban.
Can't burn anymore. Yes.
However, and I like to quote
Mm,
from him, he said Scrumban meant quite simply the application of Kanban to a starting position where Scrum was already in use.
mm.
It didn't mean some hybrid of two methods.
Yes. Yes.
He also said Scrumban means do all of Kanban and apply it in an environment that it's already using Scrum.
Mm,
Okay, so I just quoted from Corey Ladas, who called this
mm,
journey Scrumban.
mm,
But if you Google what is a Scrumban, okay?
Mm.
So, and I'm reading again from the actual website.
Yes.
Okay, so the first one is Wikipedia, which probably it's not very reliable, but I don't know, most people, read and learn everything from Wikipedia, right?
Mm.
So in Wikipedia said Scrum is an agile, aligned approach to
Mm.
product delivery, which is a hybrid of Scrum and Kanban.
Mm.
Okay,
Mm.
Agile Alliance.
Mm.
What is a Scrumban? Agile Alliance said Scrumban is a hybrid of both the Scrum and Kanban method.
Mm.
And Corey Ladas, who called this Scrumban, he
Mm.
specifically said it's not a hybrid of two methods.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's basically where all this confusion come from,
Mm.
because over time, I think people misunderstood the definition of Scrum Ban and where it comes from, why Corey called it Scrum Ban.
Mm.
And I also even watched lots of video on YouTube and different social media. People again talk about Scrum Ban as a framework
Yeah. I've seen
that you
that.
can, yeah, you can combine Scrum and Kanban and all those kind of things.
I
But
think
I think it's important that people know that
no.
Scrumban
Yeah. Where
is
this
a journey.
from?
It's
Also,
not a destination, it's a journey.
or I think it will be interesting for you to know that there is a certification on Scrumban somewhere. I believe I have seen that on LinkedIn. So getting certified on Scrumban. And
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
but going back to the history or the origination of Scrumban, the case study that you were referring to, Posit Science was it, right? So they were working
Mm,
on brain plasticity,
sure.
development, and they were doing Scrum for a long time. And one of the main problem they were facing was that the sprint planning and all the different events that it happens in a sprint, and based on all the requirement they were getting, they couldn't cope with that, like all the different meetings they had to go to and the requirement that kept coming on. So one of the things is that very important for people to understand, for being in a state of scrum ban you have to be in scrum first, because
Hmm.
again as you mentioned it's a journey. So when someone comes to me, or even like I hear this statement that we want to do scrum ban, let's do scrum ban, that is
Hmm.
invalid because you haven't started with
Yes,
scrum.
that's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
So
Yes, you're right. You need to be Scrum first. You need to be a true Scrum. You use the Scrum, and then at some stage you might say, okay, we need to improve, or Scrum
yes.
can't help us anymore,
Yeah.
and we want to try something else. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And again, going back to like, Scrum is not working based on that episode, we did talk about it, that try and understand why
Yes.
something is not working. That's
Mm.
important. And then you can always apply Kanban practices and principles to it. So the
Hmm.
journey, now let's go back to the journey again. Like
Yes.
this statement kind of haunts me. Like, let's do Scrum back, which is like very funny. But
Hmm.
the transition. So it's important to understand the base first, where you start. And it could be anything. Maybe you are doing waterfall at the moment and you want to try out Kanban. So Kanban is the goal, but you have to go through that journey. So in order to go through that journey, you need to understand that where your origination is. Same as Scrum Ban. So Scrum is where you originated, and then your goal might be like Kanban. So the transition period is called Scrum Ban. So
Yeah.
you cannot be starting with your transition period. That's very, very important to understand.
Yes. And also, because you're right, a few episodes ago we talked about another myth that people said, okay,
Mm.
Scrum doesn't work for us, let's do Kanban.
Yeah,
Okay, so from tomorrow we don't want to do Scrum, we want to do Kanban, and we
yeah.
talk about, this is not what Kanban suggests.
Mm.
If people
Mm.
they're doing Scrum and they, for whatever reason, they realize that Scrum doesn't help us anymore.
Mm.
I think it's very important to look at the problem that you have with Scrum. So, for
Exactly.
example, you mentioned in the case study,
Mm.
sprint planning was a issue for
Mm.
them,
Mm.
right? So, if sprint planning is the issue, then okay, what can you do? So,
Mm.
introduce change to the team and organization gradually
Mm.
and slowly, and
Mm.
let people to try, get used to the change, accept the change, and then
Exactly.
that change become part of their day-to-day life.
Mm.
Then you can go to the next step, right?
Exactly.
And then over time, you notice that okay, sprint planning, that for 2 years we every 2 weeks we've done sprint planning, we don't need to do it anymore,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Or I don't know, whatever retrospective that we've done, it doesn't really matter to us. All the sprint goal we try to achieve and never achieved.
Mm.
Now no one even talk about it, right? And this is the evolutionary approach, right? The change evolve over time,
Mm.
and people go to the next step when they're ready to.
Yes, exactly. And going back to the case studies example, you are right. So there was another problem with the team. They were change fatigued. And they did say they don't want to do anything else because they had invested so much time learning about Scrum, practicing Scrum, and they just don't want to transition to something else. So, in that case, if you think about it, Scrum Band makes sense because it's about showing them that there is something else exists that you can try out to relieve of, like, getting relieved of all the things that burden you at the moment. So that transition really made sense in that scenario. So I'm sure in different scenarios when team are, like getting frustrated with anything, I wouldn't call it a framework because a framework is not a good or a bad one. It is always about how you apply them to your life or workplaces. So maybe there could be different problem. But then another problem would be like, having too many changes at the same time.
Mm,
So that could also impact people. So in those scenarios, if you are starting out with Scrum, but after some time, let's say that, for any reason that, like those events are not working for you, it is not adding value to how you work. And if you want to try out something else, then this transition journey will definitely make sense, where you are trying out small experiments or
mhm.
practices, apply them, see that, okay, if everyone is okay to accept the change, and then take the next step.
Yeah. So, because so far we talk about what is a Scrum Band, the
Mm.
definition of a Scrum Band, and we said that Scrum Band is a journey from Scrum to Kanban, so that transition time period called Scrum Band.
Mm.
We also a little bit talk about how to gradually introduce the change
Mm.
to transform from fully Scrum to fully Kanban. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about, the people that say, okay, they see Scrumban as a framework,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about what happened, or can we actually combine these two approaches, Scrum and Kanban, together and mix it up and come with something new and call it Scrumban? What do you think might happen? Is it a good idea? Can happen? You know what I mean? So I'd like to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
So
Um,
what do you think about
I
mixing Kanban and Scrum?
think mixing, as in, like, first thing is that you can apply Kanban practices to everything
Mm-hmm.
out there.
Yes.
You don't have to make a new framework out of it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but if you think about it, like, how Scrum is, like, it's about focusing on that time boxed
Mm-hmm.
versus, Kanban is focusing on the flow.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
So
exactly.
this is the first thing that always the people are conflicted with, that how can
Mm-hmm.
we get that.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
that's where I believe there's a, like, lot of confusion that happens. So now this is another part of it, right? Like, if you are trying to do things in sequence, like, okay, we have to do it in 2 weeks. We
Mhm.
want to achieve as much flow as possible in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Like, we will do a sprint planning. We will, like, what do you say, like, cap the number of work that the team will
Yeah,
work on. And then just in between that, like, let them run free and achieve flow.
that's right.
It's
You mentioned a really important thing about Scrum and Kanban and the fundamental difference. So, as you said, Scrum use a practice and time box things, right?
mm, mm,
Time boxing as a practice, which is called sprint.
yes.
Okay, but Kanban focus on the flow,
Mm,
and they conflict. Okay, because they fundamentally different.
yeah.
So Scrum has a stop-start approach.
Mm,
So you plan to achieve something, a goal, a sprint goal,
mm,
right? And then team and business both commit to the sprint goal, and
mm.
team commit to deliver or achieve the goal, and business commit not to change the goal. Okay,
Yeah.
and this is a Scrum value, right?
Yeah.
And then they stop and say, okay, all done,
Mm,
lock the backlog.
mm,
Now we start delivering
yeah.
to achieve the goal.
Mm,
And then they try to achieve the goal, end of the time box or sprint.
mm,
They say, okay, now stop and then start another
mm,
goal, right?
mm.
But Kanban, as you mentioned, always focus on the flow of the work, right? So the work comes from customer. When we have capacity, we pull the work and we start.
Mm, yes,
We don't need to wait until the time box finish,
exactly. Yeah.
right? And that's a fundamental difference between Kanban approach and Scrum approach.
Mm,
So yes, we definitely can use Kanban practices and principles and tools, Kanban board, which is now part of almost all teams, Scrum, project team, whatever.
yeah.
And other principles like, for example, focus on the work, not the
Mm,
worker, those kind of thing.
mm,
Again, it helps everyone to help the team and work better. Whatever they do it a little bit better.
exactly. Yeah.
But mixing these two together, and this is my personal opinion, maybe other people have different experiences,
Mm,
it causes more confusion
exactly.
rather than help, right?
Yeah.
So um, yeah, you do you want to add something or?
I do actually. So you did, like, I totally agree with you that it caused a lot of confusion, and that's why it is really important for people who are going through the transition to understand Scrum fundamentally in a better way. Because
Mm,
understanding the purpose, it's not only about, like, the different meetings you go to, different events you attend. It's also the purpose and the intent behind them. Like, for example, if there is a sprint, why there is a sprint,
mm,
why the time box is being so valued in Scrum, why the sprint goal is, or the product goal is so important. If you understand all those things, it will be much better for you to transition to Kanban, because the confusion will be less. Now, imagine if someone is starting with Scrumban, where,
yeah, what does that mean?
exactly, like, I don't know what that's mean, because for me, that's why, like, I was, like, when we were talking about that, okay, let's talk about this today, I was thinking that, okay, well, it's a myth, it's a really big issue that many organizations are facing, because they try to start in a state which cannot achieve any value. The state will only have value when you understand the fundamental of where you are coming from and where you want to go, what's your goal. So the
Mm,
confusion wouldn't happen if someone has practiced Scrum for some time and they know what's the purpose or the intent of the framework is. And from there, if they want to, like, try out something else and then improve, and they say, let's try out Kanban. Instead of just transitioning fully into Kanban, they want to take that step by step approach, so that no one is change fatigue in the team. And it
Mm.
makes sense for me then that, okay, you are introducing small practices and seeing then what's the benefit of it. Like, for example, the whip limit, let's say,
Yeah.
you used to, like, just have work in the column.
Mm.
Now you are trying to build a pull system. Now your
That's right.
board will like indicate when you have capacity, even though
Yeah.
you are not pulling work maybe in between the sprint, but
Yeah.
still it is going to show you that, okay, like we are capturing our lead time, we have a pull system, we are not pushing work to the next column. It can start with that, as
Yeah.
simple as that, like you are applying whip limit.
That's right. Most people who say, okay, we do Scrum Ban. So
Hmm.
basically, what they do is they do sprint planning.
Yeah.
They commit to the sprint goal, which is
Yeah.
mostly they don't commit to sprint goal. They just commit to a bunch of
Yes.
user story. And then they put a whip limit on different column on their uh, Scrum board,
Mm.
right? So their Scrum board has a sprint backlog or committed backlog, and then, for example, development test, etc., etc.
Yeah.
They put some whip limit on
Yeah.
those, and then they say, okay, this is a Scrum ban. But what actually happening, and that's why to me this approach doesn't really make sense,
Yeah.
is Scrum already start with a cross-functional team, right? So
Yes.
if you don't have a cross-functional team, you're not Scrum in the first place. Don't even call yourself a Scrum, okay? And also the size of the team should be small. So you
Yeah.
normally have like 6, 5, 10 people maximum
Yeah.
ish, right?
Yeah.
And Scrum already use a whip limit. So basically, those number of user story that you commit to deliver, this is your whip for
Mm.
the entire sprint. And
Yes.
these team try to finish all this user story,
Mm.
okay?
Mm.
Which basically means achieve the sprint goal,
Yeah.
right? When you have a small team and you committed to 10 works,
Mm.
which is your whip limit for this sprint,
Mm.
then having whip limit on development and test doesn't really make sense because you have only 10 work and you have 5 people. So
Exactly.
these 5 people needs to finish these 10 works,
And yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So Scrum simplify the process, and I understand
Yeah.
that it's good. I'm not saying it's not good,
Mm.
but and that's something I really like about Scrum.
Mm.
Scrum simplify everything, and I personally big fan of simplification, right? I like
Mm.
to simplify things. But you have a very simple framework,
Mm.
and then you try to add
A lot of
some
things.
other stuff,
Mm.
right? Like whip limit, and you don't really know what does that mean,
Mm.
and then you just confuse yourself. Right? So you have three
Exactly.
developers. Okay, you never have more than 3 or 4 or 5 maximum in development anyway because you're committed to 10 works.
Mm.
So why do we need to have whip limit on each column? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. However, like if they want to transition, that is the simplest thing that I've seen teams starting with, applying whip limit to create a pull system and see how it feels instead of just pushing the work to the next column. And for some team that really works and they understand the value and the power of pull system. So that's again, up to the team which practice they want to start with when they are
Yeah,
transitioning. But one more
but
thing,
mhm.
one more
Just
difference.
one thing about pull system.
Yeah.
Scrum is a pull system too.
Well,
Scrum is not a push, but you pull at sprint planning. You pull
yes.
a batch of work. That's what I'm
Yes,
saying.
that's a
Stop,
batch,
start, right?
exactly, the batch thing and the
Yeah.
flow. So once you understand or once you experience the flow, it's a different kind of feeling and motivation
Hmm.
for people. And the batching is also a different experience. So if
Yes.
you're starting with batching and you
Hmm.
are scared to jump to the flow immediately, you might want to do that in a more like, structured, more like safely experimented kind of way, where
Yeah.
you might want to do that within the sprint, that how does it like feel to have a
Mm.
flow system, and that's where you can do that. But another like big
Yeah.
difference, Kanban and Scrum, is that Scrum has a backlog, Kanban has options. So the difference is also like, talking about the psychology of it, because when
Hmm.
things are options, you're not committing to work on everything.
Yeah.
Whenever the options, it's like prioritized where it is there, like it's really, we have the confirmation that something is of utmost priority and the customer is going to use it.
Hmm.
That's when we commit in Kanban. However, in Scrum, we put things in the backlog. And one of the things that actually, in a way, tells our stakeholder, which is
Uh-huh.
again a misunderstanding, is that anything that gets into the backlog will get done someday, because
Yeah, but
that's a psychology thing. So,
yeah, that's very similar to Kanban option because what's in the backlog, it's not committed. The work that committed is those that move to sprint backlog and team pull them to the committed and during sprint planning. So Scrum also differ the commitment point to sprint planning. People have different interpretation and understanding. I
that's
think
the thing.
that's different story
Yeah.
because people also have different interpretation and understanding about option in Kanban and
Mm.
what Kanban is, and that's basically why we started this podcast, right?
Yeah.
But I think that this is again to me very similar.
It is similar. However, how it is applied in organization is very different. That's where I'm
Yeah.
coming from. So, one of the other misunderstanding
Mm.
about moving directly to Kanban is that the difference between backlog and options. I've seen that, experienced that. And that's why people think that, it's always a safe state to be in the Scrumban rather than just go fully to Kanban. So, what I'm trying to say here is that
Uh-huh. Yeah.
the myth is that Scrumban can be a goal, which is not
Yes.
possible. We both agree we are doing this episode,
Well,
but
it's not
based
what
on,
we agree, it's what it is. We're just
yeah,
telling what Scrumban is. It's not
yes,
what we agree. Yeah.
yeah. And also, like, this is where, based on the observation of what we have spoke about, the difference between Scrum and Kanban,
Mm.
that's where I think the misunderstanding and the misconception comes from, that okay, we can stick to Scrumban, we don't have to move to Kanban because of
Yes.
this reason, which is might be scary, or people are still not ready to go there.
Because people know Scrum, they don't really know Kanban, and
No,
I
yeah.
think we in one of the episodes we said okay, most people think Kanban is for operation, right?
Yeah,
But they said because we are a project team
yeah.
and Scrum is the only agile framework, so we should be Scrum, and probably the Scrum Master or agile coaches said, you have to be Scrum. And then they say, okay, good, but we need to do something else because that doesn't really help us, or we're not ready for Scrum. So they just come with this weird hybrid approach, which I think it caused more confusion than helped them.
Exactly. Exactly. I agree with that.
All right, so just because we're running out of time to kind of wrap up and have a kind of takeaways at the end.
Yeah.
So I would summarize what we discussed about Scrum Band, and so Scrum Band basically is a journey, not a destination,
Hmm.
and it's a journey that starts from Scrum until you become fully flow-based approach and Kanban.
Yes, agree. And I think that's the main takeaway from today's episode. Understanding that it's a journey. So even thinking that it could be your goal is a myth. And try to understand more where you are. And in order to be in Scrum Band, you have to know Scrum, the fundamentals better, in a better way, so
That's
that
right.
you can
Yeah.
transition. Well, that's it.
Perfect. Good. All right. Thanks, Soma, and thanks everyone for listening to us today.
Thanks, Orod. Thank you, everyone.